Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the first and perhaps the most important S.O.L.I.D principle, the single responsibility principle, also known as SRP. Applying S.O.L.I.D principles during development help you to write loosely coupled code that is easier to maintain and modify. Now this is one of those principles that is very easy to understand but takes practice to master and implement, simply because sometimes it can be difficult to spot when our code is violating this principle. So let's look at its definition first. The SRP states that every function, class and module should do one thing only, or they should have only one responsibility. How can it be confusing? After all we need to do is to ensure that an object or entity is doing one thing, right? Well, let's look at an example. Suppose I want to develop an operating system. How many objects or classes do you think I should create? Well, it is only one OS, so maybe I can have just one class. That single class will have only one responsibility: to perform the job of an operating system. While this is an extreme example, and you can clearly see that my definition of one responsibility is wrong here, as operating system is certainly doing more than one task, but sometimes it can be difficult to make this decision. Another great way of defining SRP given by Robert Martin is that a unit of code should have only one reason to change. Now in my previous example, if I only created one class for my OS, and let's say I need to modify anything, for example, the file copying algorithm, then I will need to modify this class. Similarly, if I want to optimize the RAM utilization algorithm, I will again need to modify the same class. This means that I will need to change my class for multiple reasons, and by just creating one class, I am violating this principle. Another important thing to remember is that single responsibility principle does not just apply to classes or objects. It applies at every level. When writing code, we should ensure that our methods, classes, and modules all follow this principle. If a method or function is doing anything else than what its name says, then more often than not, it will be violating the single responsibility principle. For example, let's say we saw a login method in code. Now the first impression that we will have after reading the method name is that it helps to log in a user. But when we look at the code of the method, we find out that it blocks the user account after 3 failed login attempts. Now clearly this method is violating the single responsibility principle. An easy way of identifying whether a function violates SRP is by describing what it does. And if you need to use words like and or, then that's a clear indication that your function is violating SRP. So in the above example, if we had to describe what the method was doing in its name, then we might have to rename it to login or log account. And that tells you that the method might be violating SRP. Often higher-level functions aggregate multiple smaller functions, and it is absolutely fine to have them in our code. But then, their responsibility should only be to aggregate those smaller methods. Applying SRP in code can also help us in designing our code. Suppose I'm building a simple rich text editor which can do basic formatting and spell check. After my initial design, I decided to create a single rich text document class with 4 methods in it. The design looks perfectly fine because I have created one class that has one single responsibility. It is responsible for managing a rich text document. However, what will happen if I need to make a change in the formatting code? We need to change this class. What will happen if I need to change the spell check feature? We will again need to modify the same class. This suggests that I might be violating the single responsibility principle. So let's refactor this code. Let's refactor the code in two classes, text formatter and spell checker. My rich text editor class now utilizes these two classes. If I need to modify the spell check feature now, I will only touch the spell checker class, and if I need to change the formatting code, then I will edit the text formatter class. And notice how all my classes are following the single responsibility principle now. By checking my code for violation of SRP and refactoring it, I was able to come up with more maintainable code. Often classes that have very generic names or words like manager or services within their names end up violating the single responsibility principle because it is easy for a developer to just add any functionality related to that concept within those classes without asking themselves if it is the right place for that piece of code. Okay, time for a quiz. Do you think we should create separate classes for bold, italic, and underline methods as well? Let me know in the comments below. It is also possible for modules or assemblies to violate the single responsibility principle. For example, if we create data access layer in our code that contains all the logic to talk to a database, then we should avoid creating classes that enforce business rules in that assembly. That is the responsibility of the service layer. Whenever you're creating a class, always ask yourself, what is the purpose of creating this class and which module does it belong to? Answering these questions will make it easier to place your classes in the right assembly. That's it for today, guys. If you found this video useful, please make sure to check out some of my other videos for more useful information. Alright, see you next time. Bye.